Portions of the sales of this program will benefit the Wayman Tisdale Foundation. Hello and welcome to the first commentary, the production experience commentary, for a movie called Witness Protection that I produced. My name is Corey Perella. I am a movie producer in Denver, Colorado, and I'm going to walk you through what it was like to work with Wayman Tisdale, at least for me. I was in my early 20s. I was 21 years old when I sat down to write this script, and what can I tell you? There have been a lot of movies that have been made that have had really rough production experiences. When I worked at Universal Studios and had a chance to see Steven Spielberg's world up close and personal after kind of walking in his footsteps growing up. He started his filmmaking days in Arizona pretty much where I did, so there was a lot of relating to him. Unfortunately, I would have the experience of working with some of the same people that sort of were a stumbling block to him early on. And I'm going to share some of the things that I learned along the way in hopes that those who want to be filmmakers can get something out of it. And one of the encouragements I got from a lot of people that have known me throughout my life is to try to be as objective and compassionate about this experience as possible. To be blunt, there's a couple things I need to say up front. One, I wouldn't, if I could travel back in time, I would not have made this movie. And two, Wayman Tisdale's family was so abused and burned by the people who I was working with in the course of the making of this movie. They don't like it. They hate this movie. They have gone to great lengths to try to tune it out and to ignore it, which is why if you tune into the Wayman Tisdale websites, there's no mention of this film. Hopefully over time that will change, but for now it is what it is. And since the days when this was first filmed, it was October of 1995, I was not a Christian at that time. I am today. I am a licensed pastor, which is, if you ask my family, it is a loose term. But I've since been able to share this film with some people who I have learned a lot from and who I deeply respect, including a wonderful woman of God who managed actor Jim Caviezel through The Passion of the Christ. Her name is Beverly Dean, and she gave me a lot of good insight on what to expect after I was able to share a rough version of this with her. And a gentleman that has been with her for a while, since the mid-1990s, who was actually in White Men Can't Jump, a film you'll see a lot of homage to in this picture. His name was Frank Rossi, and he was in White Man Can't Jump, among many other movies, currently still acting and coaching acting in New York, and I really take his input seriously. Being able to share it with my sort of screen heroes was a real blessing, and this movie did in fact open some doors, and I spent many, many years lamenting how I spent the money, or how the money sort of evaporated when I tried to pour it into this picture. And shortly before doing this version of the DVD, I had to file a tax return related to the... I donated the Film Masters to a museum, the Oklahoma Historical Society, in 2008, and I'll just say that the amount that was claimed was 8 figures. $15,000 invested into an 8-figure turnover is pretty good. So I stopped complaining about the financial end, and then the Lord blessed me with a spouse who was able to mentor me through my lost years of college. I had a miserable collegiate experience in Tucson. I did not ever attend the University of Arizona. I have a deep love for everything Lute Olson brought to Arizona at that time. My dad was a graduate of the University of Arizona, but I never physically attended the school. I won't say where I went. I'll just say that I'm glad I have enrolled and am almost graduating from Colorado State University. Now, all that having been said, I wish I would have gone to college and finished rather than make this movie. But here we are. And by the grace of God, let me explain what that long prologue was, because I didn't know how long this movie was going to be. I wrote a feature film script. I wrote a 200-page screenplay that we shot less than a third of. These video sequences were added a few years later. This was an actual baptism at a church I attended, and I thought it was important to establish this was a Christian film. And all the other stuff, I didn't have any other visual tools to bring the audience up to speed with what this movie was going to be about. Now, the number one question people have asked is, what is the connection between basketball and the production topic of the movie porn? And the answer is nothing. The characters happen to be knee-deep in pop culture, and pop culture's chosen sport is in the United States in the 1990s is essentially basketball. Basketball has become the language. Sure, some could argue football, some could argue baseball, but yeah, basketball really kind of took over. the Lord allowed Wayman Tisdale to appear in our film for a few days. Now, to explain how he got to be a part of it, in a little while, you're going to see a scene containing an actor whose name is Angel Tito Salgado Jr. I regret the day I met this man. I'm going to use the term former associate from now on. You won't hear me say his name again. In order to remain semi-objective and sort of a hindsight of 2020, sort of the wisdom of Solomon, I will not be saying his name again. If you ever see the movie Matchstick Men, I would compare him to the Sam Rockwell character. He was that personified. And he knew just enough about movie producing that he was able to sort of talk his way into Wayman Tisdale's life. At one point, he called the Phoenix Suns organization. Dick Van Arsdale was at that time either their vice president or general manager, some kind of a high-ranking official. And he was a very effective telemarketer. My former associate was a very effective telemarketer. That I'll give him. And he was able to talk Mr. Van Arsdale into giving him Tisdale's private pager number. Called him. Wayman answered. And my former associate decided to pitch him on the idea of, hey, be in our movie and we'll produce your music video. At the time, Wayman was trying to transition from basketball to music. The fact is, Wayman Tisdale never needed a music video to succeed. But back then, Michael Jordan was involved with Space Jam, and Spike Lee was tinkering with a project that would eventually be called He Got Game. To this day, I believe Mr. Lee decided to make He Got Game after reading the working title script for this movie, which was originally called 21. I thought the Michael Jordan operatic commercials that Nike had at that time were really cool, where they played opera music behind very slow-motion basketball. And the solitaire basketball game 21, in which by the bounce of a ball, anything can happen, always struck me as a very humanistic view of fate. And this was long before I became a Christian. So the original screenplay was, if you're raised in a suburban life of crime where the elements of the world are dragging you down and you have little to no future, go be a movie director and New Line Cinema will give you a life. And at the time, Clerks had just come out. The brothers McMullen had been crowned at his Sundance. El Mariachi had set some records. And I talk a little bit in my book, Jedi to Jesus, The Making of a Christian Filmmaker, about the mirage of El Mariachi and how later on in life, guys like Christopher Nolan eventually went on to do Batman Begins. They're not really given credit for having made their pictures for less than El Mariachi was made. And they went on to make better movies than what Mr. Rodriguez did. But in the meantime, my former associate really wanted to imitate Miami Vice. He was a big Miami Vice fan, and at the time this movie was being developed, Heat had just come out, another Michael Mann picture. We didn't have the money to compete with a $60 million movie. We had roughly $15,000, stirred up by I had a workman's comp settlement from an injury I had, and my grandmother died and left all the grandkids an inheritance. So I was a 20-year-old kid with a bunch of mounting debt. I had a hard time maintaining a job. I was relatively homeless during the shoot. And we shot this humanistic movie about, make movie like Robert Rodriguez did and you'll be rich and famous, like Howard Stern quotes in his interview with Rodriguez. All that stuff poisoned me. And it led me to make this one-third filmed, heavily litigated, fought-over movie in which my former associate tried to basically relive his fantasies about being a cast member of Miami Vice. And the result is, 10 years later, Final Cut Pro allowed for the digital editing you see here. I mentioned that Spike Lee was briefly involved. We submitted the script, the shooting script for 21 to 40 Acres and a Mule, and at that time Spike Lee's response was, "Thank you, no thank you, I want to go make the Jackie Robinson story." 2 or 3 years later, I was watching the Jackie Robinson story on